Alright, let's see what we have here. Looks like a double Serum Vision's hand, so pretty inclined to just keep here even though it's only one land because we have two Serum Visions. And we've got a bunch of spells, so potentially we can just go through these cards in our hand pretty quickly, but we do want another early creature as well as land, so there's definitely a couple of things we're looking for. And hopefully Serum Visions can help set us up. Just looking for another threat, some lands, and then we can fire these cheap spells like Apostle's Blessing, Mutagenic Growth, Lightning Bolt, and then move towards our late game of Bedlam Reveler. So, gonna go ahead and shock ourselves here with the Steam Vents. And we actually found two lands on top. And we drew a Swift Spear for the turn, so not too bad. Don't even think we need the third land. So, gonna put the Spirebluff Canal on top. And next turn we can set up with Swift Spear plus something else, which is exactly where we want to be. And now we shall see exactly what deck our opponent is playing, hopefully. So here's a Windswept Heath for Temple Garden, so we may be seeing... Okay, it's actually a Slippery Boggle, so we're up against green-white Hexproof auras. So we're going to have to try to race our opponent. We don't have a Thing in the Ice, which is also quite good against them. So let's set up here with our second Serum Visions. Once the Swift Spear is in play. So we're seeing Faithless Looting and Mutagenic Growth. Very interesting. I don't think we want either of these cards because we just picked up a Looting, and another Mutagenic Growth doesn't seem like where we want to be here. We're really looking for cards like Temur Battle Rage to be able to deal a ton of damage at once. Mutagenic Growth is basically just a 3 damage burn spell at this point, which might not be enough to get us there. So we have to be aware that on turn 3, something like a Daybreak Coronet or Unflinching Courage may be coming down. Alright, so here's Ethereal Armor and a Spider Umbra, so that makes the Slippery Boggle quite large. And pretty much nothing we can do if our opponent has the nuts here except try to outdraw them. So we're going to fire off this Faithless Looting. And we drew a second Bedlam Reveler, which we're of course going to want to discard to this Looting. Not sure what the other card will be that we want to pitch. It's probably just this Apostle's Blessing here, which isn't doing that much for us right now. So we're going to pitch those two cards. And we drew another Serum Vision, so we can go ahead and cast it. See what we pick up here. So now we're seeing, now we actually got the Temur Battle Rage. And the Thing in the Ice on top, it's going to be hard for us to flip it in time. That's the problem. If we had it earlier, it would have been great. Now it's less spectacular, so just going to bottom these cards. Not really that interested in them. And we could fire off the Lightning Bolt here, but I'd rather save it for next turn to hopefully we can win next turn actually with Mutagenic Growth, Lightning Bolt, and Temur Battle Rage. But if our opponent has something like a Daybreak Coronet, that's really going to spoil our plans, it seems like. And there it is, the Coronet. Exactly what we did not want to see. So we were actually pretty close to being able to kill our opponent before this happened, but now that it has happened, it's not looking great because our opponent can gain some life here, although we're going to make a big double striking guy, so we can just attack and hope for the best here, basically. See what our opponent elects to do. Looks like a block, so we could fire off the Mutagenic Growth here and the Bolt. So we cast the Mutagenic Growth. Our Swift Spear then becomes a 4-power creature. The Bolt, it becomes a 5-power. The Temur Battle Rage, it becomes a 6-power. But we're still not able to get past the boggle. So, yep, that's pretty much game, unfortunately. Our opponent just had a really good draw. And our draw was good too, but it wasn't. Our nut draw is not as good as our opponent's nut draw, as it turns out. So, moving on to our sideboard options. We can think about what we want to do. We are going to be on the play here again. Swan Song, interestingly, does counter enchantments. So we could board this card in as a way to counter some of our opponent's enchantment spells, like a Daybreak Coronet. Blood Moon is also another option because our opponent doesn't... that deck doesn't normally play that many basics, so I kind of like the idea of Blood Moon. In terms of cards we do not want... Normally, I like shaving Mutagenic Growth in most matchups. Apostle's Blessing is also a card we can go down on if we want to, although it does help us get past some of our opponent's creatures. Fine with potentially cutting these Bedlam Revelers because they are a bit slow. I think we want to cut one. Not sure about the second one. I think we can cut it. We can cut one Kiln Fiend, one Bedlam Reveler, and then one more Mutagenic Growth. Keeping in the Apostle's Blessing because our opponent does have cards like Path to Exile. So I think I like that. Alright, let's try this. Wow, so really weird draw here. 2 Swift Spears, and then 3 Thing in the Ices. No spells, though. I think we have to mulligan this. Really weird hand there. We really do need some... Like, if we just had one not-creature spell in that hand, I would have kept. But we didn't. So, we're going to keep the 6. There is a Thing in the Ice on top of our deck. Which we can keep it on top, but we're probably gonna want to just fetch with our Polluted Delta. Yeah, I think we're gonna want to do that, but let's just pass the turn here. We'll see what our opponent plays. And looks like it's probably going to be a hexproof threat, so Thing in the Ice is definitely good against hexproof creatures, but I think we want the second land even more, so let's crack this Polluted Delta, get a Steam Vents, and we're going to hope to be able to cast this Kiln Fiend. And Kiln Fiend, it represents a lot of damage. So we're going to start off with this Probe, see what our opponent's working with. So it looks like just a Path and a Rancor. Interesting. So the Path is going to be able to take out our Kiln Fiend here, which is a bit unfortunate. But we still want to run it out. And if our opponent pass it, then it's getting us closer to this Bedlam Reveler, which we have in hand. Pretty happy that we left one in our deck for this sort of a situation where the game could draw out a few turns. Even though this matchup, game one, was very much just which of us could goldfish our opponent faster. And our opponent's main phasing the Path there to play around Apostle's Blessing or something like a counterspell of some sort. And there's a swan song. Interesting. So we're going to fire off a Faithless Looting here. And we found a Thing in the Ice, which we are interested in casting here. So I think since we're going to cast the Thing in the Ice, we don't need the Swan Song as much. And we could also pitch this Mutagenic Growth, I think. And get this Thing in the Ice into play. And we're not that far from being able to flip the Thing in the Ice, really. Got a Manamorphose we can fire off. The turn we flip it, we do want to be Temur Battle Raging if possible. Although here's an Unflinching Courage, which is pretty bad for us. So our opponent's going to be able to gain some life here. And we drew another Temur Battle Rage, so not what we wanted there. So to start, I like going with a Manamorphose here. That's going to take a counter off our Thing in the Ice. And there's a Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt also not at its best in this matchup. So I think we want to just go ahead and flash back our Faithless Looting that's in our graveyard. See what we can find off of it. Alright, so it's land, Serum Visions. I think we just want to pitch a Battle Rage and a Bolt, most likely. Although we are in danger here of losing on our next turn, but I think we still go with this. And we can fetch with an island now to cast our Serum Visions. If we do draw into a 0 mana card like a Jataxian Probe, we could cast it and flip our Thing in the Ice, but we didn't. So Thing in the Ice is on 1 now. And we're pretty much forced to pass back. If our opponent has something that's going to pump the Slippery Boggle. Okay, so it's pumped up to 7 right now. So we're going to take this now and go down to 1. Which is definitely risky. But we have a Temur Battle Rage, which we can fire on the Thing in the Ice to flip it. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. And if our opponent has a path, that would, of course, spoil all of our plans, but wouldn't really make sense for our opponent to have Path at this juncture. So that is going to work. But our opponent's Rancors go back to their hand. So we have to be wary of that. And sometimes you get into these spots where you're like, I wish I hadn't had to discard these cards, but you have to make choices. We discarded a bunch of cards which now we would want in our hand, but we never really were able to keep them around. And certainly if we had another Temur Battle Rage, that would be great. But this Bedlam Reveler hopefully will find us what we want, what we're looking for. Here's a Serum Visions. So there's another Serum Visions on top. There's also a Swift Spear. So we have to think about what exactly we want to do here. We know that our opponent has a Rancor. We're not sure what else. I think we want to bottom the Swift Spear and top the Serum Visions. So let's go with that. And the question is it too aggressive to attack here? It's definitely pretty aggressive because our opponent can just Rancor up a creature. So I think we don't attack this turn. Just play our Kiln Fiend, and then we can play our Bedlam Reveler. And so now we have 3 blockers, which is a reasonable amount of blockers. We also have the Serum Visions, which we could cast, but I think I like waiting one more turn. Really no reason to fire it off now. So we're going to pass back. And so our opponent drew Horizon Canopy. Pretty likely that that just gets cashed in for a card. It looks like that is what's going to happen. And we have some more card draw, so we can filter through our deck to find what we really are looking for. Here's a Hyena Umbra. Not too worried about that card. The Slippery Boggle is big, but it's still not big enough to get past our Awoken Horror. And there is the Temur Battle Rage, exactly what we wanted. So let's start off with the Serum Visions here. And we should be able to win this turn. We're just going to, assuming that our opponent doesn't have a Path to Exile, we will be fine. Drew Blood Moon here, which it's a little bit late to the party. And one thing we can do is discard the Blood Moon. And that's going to make our opponent think that we're going to have it for the next game, which, assuming there's going to be a next game, which we may not actually want to have. So, yeah, just going to do that, make that play. And now we've just got a bunch of huge creatures. Our opponent cannot block them all. So we're just going to move in with the team. And it wouldn't make sense for our opponent to have Path here. So just going to fire off this Battle Rage, and that should do it for this game. So, yep. Going to move on to a decider now. And we can think a bit more about our strategy for the last game. So a card like Blood Moon is definitely weaker on the draw because our opponent's going to be able to deploy their threats primarily before we would be able to play it. So I think I'm fine with taking out at least 2, possibly even the third one as well, and just boarding back in the mutagenic growths. And we can also, I think we might want one more Bedlam Reveler. Card was pretty solid, although it took a while to actually play that last game. Vapor Snag is only good if our opponent has one of those weird draws that does not involve a hexproof threat. So, just going to go with this. And another 1-land hand. Pretty happy to keep it, though, because we do have a 1-mana threat and then a bunch of 1-mana spells. So, yep, just the way our opponent wants to start off the game. Glade Cover Scout. And I don't think we actually want to use the probe just yet. So just going to get in there for the 1 damage. With the Swift Spear and pass the turn here. And next turn we'll be able to set up a bit more, hopefully. Alright, Spider Umbra. Not really unexpected. Hopefully, seems like this could be a... Maybe our opponent doesn't have a second land. We'll see. Okay, no second land, so that's definitely good news for us. And now we drew a Kiln Fiend. So we might just want to save all of our spells for next turn. Which I kind of like the idea of doing that. So just going to get in there with the Monastery Swift Spear here. And I think we can afford to just get a basic land off the fetch. And we'll see if our opponent elects to attack here with the scout again. If that is what our opponent does, it's going to be pretty aggressive. Now, the second land could definitely mean a Daybreak Coronet, which would be worst case scenario. Instead, it's going to be a Spider Umbra. And our opponent's getting in again, so we're just going to take it. Alright, so now let's see what's going on. We'll see if our opponent has something like a Path to Exile here to interact with us. So our opponent's got 3 cards in hand, and it looks like there is a path along with a Rancor and a Core Spirit Dancer. However, we drew a Swan Song for the turn, which is a pretty good draw. Huh. I think I'm going to actually fire off this second probe here, even though we do already know what is in our opponent's hand. And it looks like our opponent might actually be responding here with a path on the Kiln Fiend. So we have a choice here. If we decide to play a counterspell, it just makes the most sense because it looks like we can actually get in for lethal this turn. So we're just going to Swan Song away the path here. Although our opponent is going to get a 2/2 bird, which can block. So that may change the math a little bit, although we can just bolt it away. So I think we're still good. actually, because the Kiln Fiend's just going to get so incredibly large. And we see what's in our opponent's hand. We can actually just cast the... We can basically kill our opponent in however way we choose. I kind of like going with the Teamer Battle Rage just for the most damage. So let's do that. And that's what this deck can do. It just has some incredibly explosive draws where you just combo your opponent out so quickly. And Kiln Fiend was able to do that along with a bunch of spells. And that's going to do it for the match.